Hey, everybody, and welcome to another deep dive, this time into the elusive world of happiness.
Always a fun one to unpack.
Right. You'd think with all the books, the gurus, the whole self-help industry, we'd have this happiness thing figured out by now.
Right.
But it's kind of like the more you try to grasp it, the more slippery it gets, you know?
Paradox, for sure.
Totally. So to dig into this a bit, we're diving into some, let's just say, unconventional ideas today from a writer named Jordan. We're really interested in his take on the whole pursuit of happiness thing.
Okay.
Because he kind of turns it on its head. We all know that feeling of I'd be happy IF.
Right.
Like, if I get that promotion, if I find the perfect partner, if I finally get those genes I've been eyeing.
The eternal if only.
Exactly. And Jordan's saying that this conditional happiness thing, it's like the ultimate happiness killer. It's like we're setting ourselves up for failure from the get-go.
Right, because there's always going to be another if.
Right.
It creates this never-ending cycle of striving.
Exactly. And that feeds directly into what he calls the false self, which is such a powerful image, right? It's this version of ourselves we create based on what we think will make us happy, or often what we think will make other people happy with us, which is a whole other can of worms.
It's like we're trying to fit ourselves into these predetermined boxes instead of just being who we truly are, which never quite works out, does it?
Never. It's exhausting, too. And that's where I think this negative adaptive child concept comes into play, right? Can you unpack that a bit?
Yeah, sure. So imagine it like this, you're a kid, right?
Yeah.
And you're trying to make sense of the world and figure out how to get your needs met.
Right. It's survival at that point.
Yeah, and along the way, you pick up on certain patterns and behaviors that seem to work in the sense that they help you avoid pain or gain approval.
Like being the good kid who doesn't rock the boat too much.
Exactly. Or maybe it's being the class clown to get attention. Whatever works in your particular environment. But here's the thing. Those adaptations, they stick with us. And as adults, they often pop up as those automatic reactions to stress, conflict, those moments when we feel uncertain or insecure.
So even though they might have served us at one point, they can really hold us back from experiencing genuine happiness and fulfillment later on, huh?
Yeah, it's like they're running the show from behind the scenes.
Oh, totally. And this whole conditional happiness trap, that's what fuels those not-so-helpful reactions, according to Jordan.
Right. So how does he frame that?
Well, he talks about this thing he calls SAD, suppress, agree, disagree. Like, how often do we stuff down our true feelings? Suppress. Or just agree to avoid conflict. Agree. Or go on the defensive and lash out. Disagree.
It's like our default mode is reaction, not response.
Right. And it all ties back to that fear of not being good enough, not being loved, not being accepted, all those core wounds that often stem from childhood.
Makes you wonder if we ever truly outgrow those early experiences.
Right. Food for thought.
Often, one part of us wins by suppressing the other.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing. Even when we make a decision, we often still feel this lingering doubt or regret.
Oh, 100%. It's like this low-grade guilt trip that just won't quit.
And that's because there wasn't true resolution, right? Just one part of us silencing the other, leading to that feeling of inner disunity.
Wow. That is such a good point. It's like we're at war with ourselves and no one is really winning. And this all loops back to that false self thing, doesn't it? Because we end up building this persona on top of all these internal wins that weren't really wins at all.
It's like building a house on shaky foundations.
Exactly. And, Jordan's not alone in this. There's a growing movement in therapy toward more holistic, acceptance-based approaches. Okay, so we've talked about conditional happiness, the false self, the inner critic, and the role of therapy. But now we need to talk about Jordan's real game changer. Are you ready for this?
Hit me with it.
Okay. He believes that true inner peace comes not from chasing our own happiness, but from genuinely wishing happiness on others.
I like where this is going.
Right. It's a radical shift in perspective, for sure. He calls it moving from prioritizing personal happiness, or PPH, which is kind of where most of us live, to wishing happiness on others, or WHO.
PBH to WHO. I like it. It has a nice ring to it, but it is a big shift.
Right. Huge. It's like our whole lives. We're told to go after what we want, fight for our happiness, you do you and all that. But Jordan's saying that this constant striving for personal happiness, It's actually what's keeping us trapped in that cycle of suffering.
It's like that quote, "The problem is not the problem. The problem is your attitude about the problem." When we're so focused on our own happiness, we miss out on the joy of connection, the beauty of compassion.
That's so true. It's like we're so busy looking for happiness outside of ourselves that we completely miss it blooming right under our noses.
Yes, and that's the beauty of WHO. It shifts our focus outward. It's about recognizing that our own happiness is intertwined with the happiness of others.
It's like that saying, the more you give, the more you receive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Jordan takes it even deeper. He talks about it in terms of these different levels of awareness. Level one is that self-centered happiness seeking we talked about earlier. What's in it for me?
Right, it's coming from a place of lack.
Exactly. Then level two is about cultivating equanimity and acceptance learning, to be okay with whatever arises, without judgment. It's about finding peace within ourselves, regardless of external circumstances.
Which is huge, because let's be honest, life is going to throw curveballs no matter how much we try to control it.
Always. And then level three, the pinnacle of this whole framework, is WHO genuinely wishing happiness on others.
And he's not just talking about wishing it in a superficial way, right?
No, it runs much deeper than that. It's about cultivating a genuine sense of care and compassion for all beings. It's about celebrating the successes of others and feeling empathy for their struggles.
It's funny because when you think about it that way, it seems so simple, almost obvious. Like, of course, wishing happiness on others would lead to more inner peace. But then you realize how often we get caught in that trap of comparison, envy, scarcity, all those things that just breed negativity and unhappiness.
It's a practice, for sure.
Yeah.
Just like anything else worth cultivating, it takes conscious effort and attention.
Right, it's a muscle that we need to exercise. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I have to ask, how do we start to cultivate this WHO mindset? Where do we even begin? What are some practical steps we can take to shift from that PPH, that very me-focused way of living, to something more expansive, more compassionate, and ultimately maybe more fulfilling?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right, it's a big one, but I think it all starts with awareness. Simply noticing those moments when we're stuck in that "what about me" mindset and gently guiding ourselves back to a place of compassion and generosity. Because I think deep down we all have that capacity within us. It's just a matter of tapping into it.
I think that's a great place to end it. Start with awareness and see where it leads you.
Perfect. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. Until next time, everyone.
Bye, everyone.